Welcome to True House Stories. I'm Lenny Fontana coming out of New York City. I'm so proud. We started from Chicago with Marshall Jefferson, the first show. And now all these shows later, leading back to Chicago with another prolific producer, remixer, DJ, songwriter, had 24, maybe more than 24 number one singles on the Billboard Dance Chart, could be 35 for all I know. He's remixed for artists such as Beyonce, Katy Perry, Mariah Carey, Rihanna, Daft Punk, The Killers, AC/DC, Enrique Igleasas, Sybil, Madonna. Even wrote some songs with the great Kylie Minogue, okay? On her Fever album, he did a few years of being a lecturing professor. He's accomplished. He is wonderful, talented, and his name is DJ Mark Picchiotti. Bring him on. Yes.
Wow. Yes. Quite the introduction. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Mark. Welcome to the show. You deserve it. We've been waiting to get you on. I'm so glad you're here.
Yeah, glad to be here. Thanks for asking. It's a pleasure.
I hope I didn't leave anything out. I know there's a lot more. I mean, we're talking about 40 years in the making.
Those sound good. Yeah, that sounds good.
It's hard to pack it all in, but I'll let you unpack. At the present moment, tell us what life is like right now. What's going on?
Well, I'm no longer in Chicago. I'm in Arizona. I moved here permanently made it permanent a couple of years ago. Just finished a tour. I did Chicago, my hometown. Actually played at Smartbar, which is the club that I started at 40 years ago. So it's really fun. Crazy. I go back to every once in a while, but yeah, the 40th year was back and their Sunday night Queen for Pride. It was a massive all building event. And then I flew to New York, to your neck of the woods, and did an event out on Fire Island. And that was intense and insane and fun. And then I got back and I literally just finished 3 records. I had a remix I did and 2 songs that I produced that are coming out soon. So, and then just trying to get my feet back under me right now. So there's a lot going on still.
Let me ask you something on the producer side, living in Arizona, comparing to being in Chicago and New York. You finding it a little bit harder with getting talent, or are you working most of it through the internet?
That was very difficult at first, especially for singers, because Chicago, I mean, I had the greatest singers, and I always use the same singers, right? They're like, Chicago was known as being the jingle capital of America. So we had top singers. So the girls that sang on my records were singing everywhere. They were singing, back in the day in R. Kelly's records, they were singing on Michael Jackson records, Tony, everything, right? So, and here it's been a little bit harder. Yes, finding the musician talent has been difficult. So I would send it back to my guys in Chicago, but I found my groove. I found my lane, a little less live musicians these days simply because the budgets aren't there. I used to have, when I had my studio downtown Chicago, I had 4,000 square feet of studio space and 9 employees in 3 different rooms, all going at the same time. That's when we made money in this business, right? So, and I'd spend a couple grand just on fees, musicians' fees, singers' fees, all of that. So, you go with the times and you do what you need to do to make the record you still want to make.
And that's pretty much the way it is. It's either you adapt or you close the door and say, gone fishing.
Yeah. Well, and that's never going to happen to me. I'm going to have one foot in the grave and the other on a banana peel and my hands on the deck still.
That's it. Well, thanks for coming on. Let's get right into this. I have a pretty much a formula on how this show operates, and it seems to always work. No one tells their story better than you. How does music find you as a young kid, or you find the music?
Okay. Well, that's a big question. So I was born in 1962. So at that time, what was going on musically. So I think my first real introduction was the Beatles and actually the Monkees, the TV show The Monkees, because that was made more for kids. But we were listening to Motown, the Beatles, stuff that was kind of happening early on, like Cream, Creedence Clearwater, and some, because of Motown, there was soul. So I was getting a little bit of everything. And then, I always say that all of the music that we have now all the genres really formed from that time and up until the 70s. I mean, the 70s was it. That was rock, glam rock, punk, disco, soul, just rock. Everything was finding its footing. Rap was coming about at that time. So fortunately, that was always part of my life. I always listened to the radio, but it really, I would say, I have a collection of, you see my records behind me, but at the bottom are my 45s. And I have a collection of 45s that I started 1966, 67. I mean, the first two 7-inches that I bought were the Tears of a Clown and The Lion Sleeps Tonight are the two songs. And I remember my mom gave us, I think it was like 5 cents. We went and bought our first 7-inch single. So I started buying records then. And then I think I was a big fan of folk music, loved James Taylor and Jim Croce. But at the same time, I was a big fan of Queen. I was a big fan of, in those days it was like pop radio was REM, REO Speedwagon, Boston, Supertramp. So all of that it always informed me, my whole music sensibility. And then, I mean, the way dance music really found me was disco was happening in the mid 70s, I would say. I remember hearing Hughes Corporation rock the boat. And I think that was 74 to 76, I think. So disco hadn't exploded yet. It was Saturday Night Fever that really did it. And then with Donna Summer becoming the first sort of face of disco, Gloria Gaynor, it's arguable at that point. But yeah, and I think what changed it for me was next to me in high school, I was a sophomore and there was a freshman cheerleader next to me. Her name was Karen. And she had the Donna Summer Live album, which folds out. It's this like long fold thing. And I'm like, what's that? Because she folded it out. And she said, it's Donna Summer Live. And I said, oh, can I borrow it? And she said, yes. So she gave me the record. And that was it, man. She didn't get that album back for 3 months. I just could not get enough. And that was the beginning of me buying 12 inches. I remember one of the first 12 inches I bought was by Santa Esmeralda. A cover of, oh gosh, I can't think of it. Boy, it escapes me. This is what happens when you get old. Santa Esmeralda. I cannot think of the song. I'll have to come back to it. If you know it, tell me.
Don't Let Me Be Misunderstood.
Thank you. Oh my God, Don't Let Me Be Misunderstood. And of course, at that time, I didn't know that it was a cover, right? It was actually not a dance record. So that was the first record I bought. And the funny story with that record is when the big disco demolition thing happened in Chicago at Soldiers Field with Steve Dahl, and the way that you got in for free is if you bought a 12-inch. Now, of course, I was not, I love disco, but my brother went and he said, do you have a piece of vinyl that I can use to get in? And I'm like, okay. And I gave him that record. So that record was the sacrificial lamb where I somewhat contributed to the death of disco. But yeah, so that brings me up to getting into college.
Funny you say that with Soldier Field, because when I talked to people that were there, they said that they noticed it wasn't the disco crappy records they were bringing. They were bringing Stevie Wonder. They were bringing all like R&B style things that they saw. And they felt like it was more about the homophobic and the black content of what disco was, more so than the commercialism.
Yeah. And that's really, if you go just one layer underneath it, that's exactly what it was. And that's why New Wave happened. I was going to talk about this at this point, but New Wave happened because it was white people. I hate to say that because I'm a white guy, right? But I'm gay, so I get a little bit of a pass. It was their pushback. We still like this music, but we don't like that it's, this culture. So we're going to appropriate it and we're going to whitewash it and we're going to make new wave. Because if you listen to bands, and I love these bands, but you listen to Duran Duran, early Duran Duran, or Heaven 17, Penthouse and Pavement, you take that vocal off, that's a disco record. It's basically a disco record with, at that point, some programmed drums. So it still had a groove. It's still a 4 on the floor, but it was homogenized and it was just a little easier for the straight white world to consume dance music that way, in my humble opinion.
Here's a question for you. As this was happening in the late 70s and 80s, and you're older, if you're about 16, 17, did you see any yet DJs? Were you around getting or hearing mix shows or something that's making you go, interesting, how they're blending and all that stuff?
No, I mean, really, mix shows didn't start until WGCI 102.7 FM in Chicago was an urban station. And that's when the Hot Mix 5 started, which was Ralphie Rosario, Julian Jumpin' Perez. But that was the 80s. I don't think there was anything. In fact, if I tell a little bit more of my story, as that culture evolved, I was there for it, watching it, and then realized, oh, that's what I want to do, to the degree that at that point that I was able to do it. So I don't remember anything like that happening. I mean, when I got into college, I was in a fraternity and we had a position called the music director. And that was the guy that put together the mixtapes for our fraternity party. We had I went to University of Illinois, biggest Greek system in the world. There's like 75 fraternities, 40 sororities, might be different now. So we would always throw parties, and I was the assistant music director, because there was a guy who put together the mixtapes, and you would buy the vinyl and you'd have a cassette player and just record all your songs. And so it was at that point that I learned programming, right? Because I had to think, what's going to work in the party. So that was the beginning of mixing, and the idea of mixing with a mixer, between two turntables, if that existed, I didn't know about it at that point. And that was 1980, 81.
That's why I asked, because over here in the New York area in the mid 70s, they were already doing what they call the disco mix. That's the seamless, like Disco 92 started in 78, and Ted Currier was the first guy to be on mixing seamlessly, record after record. And it was like nobody, you weren't old enough to go out nightclubbing. You heard it on the lunch mix, and you heard it also in the late night. So that's why I was wondering what influenced you.
No, I mean, really what influenced me really was, there were two things. There's been a lot of seminal moments in my career, believe me, because my career kept, bumping. But yeah, the Donna Summer album, right? That was like, wow. And then just discovering disco and buying 12 inches. And then when I went to U of I, being the music guy, eventually that guy left. And so I put together, and I had to buy music. And in those days, it was, one of the big records at the time was Heaven 17, Let Me Go, which was really interesting because I got to remix that 10 years later. It was just such a cool thing. I had an opportunity to remix a lot of the artists I had honed my DJing skills in on.
Do you have any physical training as far as piano or anything on that back end?
Good question. And, I was thinking about what I was going to say here, and that's an important aspect of how I got to where I am today. I don't. I played guitar. I took guitar lessons when I was 11, and I played French horn for 3 months, and I quit because I wasn't good enough to be first chair. And so I was kind of that kid, like I couldn't be the best. I don't want to do it. So that was about it. But the way I got into it, this is in the first quarter of my story, how I really learned. So as a DJ, right, this, you just learn structure and how things work and back and forth, but really making proper songs. Now, I was doing it in the 80s, now that I'm saying this, but it wasn't until 1990 when I got hired to be a music supervisor on a Camel Cigarettes campaign. So they were putting together a 4-girl group that kind of like the Spice Girls, before the Spice Girls. And these girls went around the U.S. and toured big clubs, like massive clubs, funded by, cigarette companies. So a lot of money. So they brought me in to help do the auditions. My partner at the time was an employee at this marketing company. So he's like, all right, well, listen, why don't we hire Mark to be the music supervisor? So that was great. Then I wound up doing the auditions. And then once I did that, I then picked the songs, and then I hired the companies to make the songs. So they were just covers of top 40. We had a pop act and a rock act. So we had 10 pop songs and 10 rock songs. And so what I did is I helped, curate the show. And then I hired these music houses to produce the song. Well, I'd go to every session, and early on I was watching what they're doing. I'm like, so basically what they're doing is they're taking the song. The producer himself would do what he could, but then he'd bring in the bass player and the drummer and the guitar player and have them do that. And I watched them doing it, and I thought, you know what? I can do this. I thought when you're young, you're fearless. I was 20, 25, something like that. And one of the songs was Kathy Dennis, Come On and Get My Love, which is more synth-based. And at that point, I had purchased an MPC-60, my drum machine, an S950, a Kai S950, which is a sampler, and I had an Oberheim Matrix 6, which is a synth. And so I recreated that song, but I had to hear all the parts all the keyboard, everything, and try and recreate that. And so that was the beginning. So I did that. And by the way, I got paid $11,000 for 3 months as a consultant. These guys were getting 14 grand per song. So I thought, I'm going to do this one and make 14 grand less the costs. So I did that. And then I was just like, you know what? You guys are fired. And I did everything else. And I mean, it was a little risky, but I brought in those musicians and I had to study how songs were made, and not only the songs, but the sounds, and then recreate the sounds and even chord structures. I'd hear a chord and figure out, how do I play that chord? So doing that for 2 years. So I did their rock show, their pop show, and then they brought me back they did a Latin market. So I did Tejano music. So in a 3-year period, I was recreating other people's music from rock to pop to Latin music, and learning at the same time, and then getting all the studio experience. So I threw myself in the deep end and just went for it. And I made enough money to buy a little, studio at my home to get things going.
So you went to university, of course. What was your major? What were you planning on doing?
I had no business being in school. And I knew I left. I went for 3 years. I went because my brother went, my older brother, who was homecoming king, football captain, president of our fraternity, that whole, and he and I I love him to death, but we are very opposite, right? I mean, very
North and
very
South,
opposite.
right?
Yeah.
Full opposite. Yeah.
Our common thread is our Italian roots, right? So I was at school and I was like, this isn't for me. Like I was a speech communications major, right? I mean, but I did appreciate that because I love public speaking. I'm very good at it. Like you said, I was a professor for 5 years. So I like to get in front of people and talk about whatever it is is the topic. So I left school and, on a personal level, I hadn't come out yet. And so it was very difficult to be at school in a fraternity. And I wasn't even ready. I wasn't certain where I was on the spectrum, for lack of a better word. So I basically, I went back to Chicago. I had a job in the summer. I was a foreman on for a painting company. I did quotes and stuff like that. And I met my first boyfriend, if you will, and moved in with him. My parents had a fit. I was outed. I never came out. I got outed. Long story short. And it was just too much. So I said, you know what, I'm done. And I met another guy. Well, I was dating the one guy and he's like, hey, you want to move to Dallas with me? I'm like, sure. So I moved to Dallas. And that's where it all started to coalesce, because I started to go to a nightclub that had just opened. It was called the Stark Club, designed by Philippe Stark, owned actually by Ian Traeger, who was the hotelier guy that did, Studio 54 and all that kind of stuff as well. So he partnered with Philippe Stark. They did this club and it was like a Studio 54 for Dallas. And this is early 80s when Dallas was trying to be the next LA. Remember, Dallas, the TV show, was massive. So I went down there and it was like being a mini LA, but it was at that club. I remember it was, velvet rope, and they had I was only 20 at the time. And the DJ was a gentleman named Rick Scolante. And
oh my God, I remember Rick. May he rest in peace. Oh my God, I've heard that name in years. Oh my God.
Right. And Rick really was my first sort of mentor, because he's a little bit older than me and he liked that I was this young little twink, but he saw that I had, or could tell I had an ear. So I would hang out in the DJ booth and, he was playing stuff nobody played. This is 83, 84. He's playing Africa Bambaataa, World Destruction. He's playing Pet Shop Boys, West End Girls, the original version that Bobby O produced at 122 beats per minute on Bobcat Records before they were ever on EMI. He was playing Malcolm McLaren, Madam Butterfly, 88 beats per minute. He played Madonna, Burning Up. It's the first time I ever heard Madonna was there. Book of Love, I Touch Roses. I mean, just this, it was open format. It had to be. And of course, he knew what was going on in New York. He knew Larry, and he knew what Larry was doing at the Garage. And Rick was an incredible tastemaker. So I watched what he did and I'm like, it all came together. I'm like, this is what I want to do. And then shortly, while I was going to the club every weekend, I'm like, wait, you played this record last week, but this is a different version. He said, yeah, it's called a remix. I'm like, oh. And I was like, ooh, what's that? And then I was like, okay, that's what I want to do. And at that time, there weren't a lot of people in the game, right? But I started to do a lot of train spotting, which is, I could tell you the BPM of a record, who produced it. I just was fascinated by it. And it's that time when, Shep and Justin Strauss and Murray Elias and Francois, all those guys were just coming onto the scene and just remixing everything under the sun. So now I had a template in front of me to say, this is what I want to do.
So the question I'm going to ask again, who amused you as the DJ? I'm going to guess Rick Scalante.
So I was already DJing, right? Because I was formatting music for parties. Also, during the disco time, I was going out. In those days, we didn't have the club, but we had the roller rink. So we, now that I'm thinking about it, they probably did beat mix at the roller rink. But, that was 50 years ago or a little bit less. I don't quite remember it. So those things got me. And then I remember one night Rick said, all right, listen, I'll let you spin, right? Actually, there's a little bit more to the story. So club closes at 5 a.m. and I was not sober. We'll just call it that. And he put on 2 records, the exact same beats per minute, and it might as well been, a train wreck happening. But just touching the vinyl and doing what I did is like, oh, I like this. And a couple months later, I had to get some dental work. And I called my mom. I'm like, Mom, I need $400 for dental work. So she sends me $400. And I'm like, I could go get the dental work or I could buy a turntable. So I bought a Technics 1200 turntable. And then I had this little rinkety plastic Panasonic turntable and I got a mixer. And that's when I started doing it in my bedroom. And in fact, the record I had the Panasonic wouldn't play unless the cover was down. But if you lifted it up and stuck your finger on it, you could slow the record down or speed it up a little bit. So all of this was kind of happening. So yeah, there was Rick, there was Star Club. And then there was the remixing thing that came in. And then of course, now exploring production and understanding this a little bit more and seeing, this is a vibe. But I mean, DJing was not a career at that time. Rick did it, but he was there 5 nights a week, and, then Rick left and he went to work for Virgin, which then he opened a lot of doors for me at Virgin as well. So
I've been wondering where the pedigree comes from, because someone opens that door or shows you that, just opens that door just wide enough for you to run through it.
Yeah.
So Rick was that guy. What a great guy.
The other thing of
hear him DJ. I never got to hear him DJ.
He honestly, that I felt like it was in a music video every time I went to Star Club because it was beautiful. It was a warehouse and there were, it was Philippe Stark, white sofas, slip covered sofas with these white sheer curtains around it all. And the dance floor was sunken down. If you or any of your viewers check out the Star Club, there's a documentary on it. It's fascinating. It's really, really good. And the dance floor was downstairs and the speakers were in the wall. So, but wherever you went, people were dancing. They had a unisex bathroom. It was just, Rick knew how to work a room. That's what I learned. And I learned to be fearless and to play what I thought made sense, not necessarily what they want. And Rick played, people didn't know these records. They weren't on the radio. So, you're watching somebody capture a crowd, get their attention, and take them where he wanted to take them.
So now we understand. So from Dallas, do you go back to Chicago or do you stay in Dallas working first DJing?
No. So I was done with Dallas, and Dallas was great for me. That's when I grew up. That was like 20 to 23. I had to get my footing. I moved down there to live with someone. That didn't work out. Got my own place and, really just kind of found my way a little. And then I knew I wanted to move back to Chicago. So I wound up getting a job with a word processing company because personal computers were just starting. And the reason I got the job is because I had a job doing word processing and I knew how to use the equipment. So let me call that company. And they had a job as a customer support. So I moved back to Chicago. And right after I moved back, I put together a demo tape that I wanted to DJ. And I sent it to the clubs. At that time, it was Smartbar, Medusa's, a club called Exit. These were all early Chicago clubs. And I probably sent out 10 tapes, cassette tapes. And one club called me back, and that was Smartbar. And the great story about that was Joe Shanahan, who owned Smartbar, was a DJ himself. And Smartbar was only 2 years old at that particular time. But he really prided himself on knowing his music. And he called, he said, listen, Mark, I get a lot of tapes. I never call anybody. He goes, because I already have my DJs. He said, but there's a record on here that I don't know. And I'm mad that I don't know the record. No, that's never happened. He goes, what is the record? And it turned out, we'll always remember, it's Depeche Mode, Master and Servant, the Slavery Whip Mix, which is the B-side of a German import, a colored picture disc. And that sort of opened the door for me with him. And then he's like, well, I don't have anything now, but if something opens up. And 2 weeks later, he called me and said, hey, our Saturday night DJ is, going to a wedding and we'd like you to DJ. Now I had one gig before that, and that was when Limelight opened in Chicago. Joe Smooth was the resident at the time. So I played for him and it went down awful because he was playing top 40 and I wasn't at all. So that did not go down very well, but I found my home at Smartbar. So I went in, and now mind you, this Chicago, they're open until 5 a.m. So my first major DJ set was 8 hours. 9 hours, from 9 to 5 a.m. I kept paid $100, and suffice to say, they love what I did. They fired that DJ, and I got my first residency at Smartbar.
That's crazy. But this is the thing that people don't understand. And I know that for a fact. You sent your cassettes out to the owners of the club. That was before it was promoter driven.
Yeah, good point. You're right. Yes. Yeah.
And I remember that too, because I remember going on auditions for club dates. And you sat with the owners, not promoters. That was later.
Yeah.
Wow, I forgot about that.
Yeah, no, good point. In fact, I started my really professional DJ. Now I still had my day job, by the way. So, and then I was working 4 nights a week. So thank God I moved into sales where I was out on the road, because I would call in at 10, with a client, just getting out of bed, whatever. But at that point I was working at Smartbar, Medusa's. And so Medusa's was our late night club. That was open till the sun came up, but it was a juice bar. So I was working there, and then I wound up working at Berlin, which is actually just recently closed, but reopened. It was a video bar that eventually became like a dance club. But I remember that there was a new club opening. It was called Shelter. And the owners came down to Medusa's. They came in the afternoon so I could audition for them in the DJ booth because their club wasn't built. And now that I'm thinking about it, that's crazy. Here the owners of the club come down to hear me play at, my club. And, I got the gig, but yeah, Shelter was another one. I mean, so I'll go through my Chicago lineage. It was Smartbar, Berlin, Medusa's. Medusa's closed in 93. I did their closing party, which was fabulous. Just an amazing night. And then Shelter, which was, I think the New York Shelter's kind of different companies entirely. But Shelter and Crobar. So Crobar was everywhere in the 90s. I had a residency there. And then I held those residencies until 96. And then that's when I started to tour. Still had the residencies, but a little less frequent. Then I wound up getting residencies in the UK. I did a residency at Hard Times in Leeds for a year. And at the same time, I was doing a quarterly residency at Ministry of Sound. But it got to be too much because I would leave. At that point, my production career was just exploding. So all that travel every month to those gigs, it just became too much.
Let's talk about that for a second.
Yeah.
The breakout record that starts everything.
Yeah.
What's that record? Everybody has that one record. Go ahead.
It's Shining, but
Ladies
it is.
and gentlemen, that's Rob DeStefano's label, but let's
That's
hear
right.
you.
This is The Absolute. There Will Come a Day. So great story behind this. I'm going to give you the story on this one. So from 1990 to 95, I had a partner. Her name was Terry Bristol. God rest in peace. Love Terry. She was amazing. And then in 95, I wanted to go off on my own. And I did a record in 94. This was my first record on my own. I wrote the song. I produced it. That's where I met my partner in The Absolute. I had him do a piano part on that for me. And I shopped it around, and Rob DeStefano loved it. And I was like, the first time you get a record saying like, oh my God, wow. And it's this record here. It's called Street Life. There Will Come a Day. This is the CD single of it. Street Life, called Love Breakdown. And I'd done that record. And then when I was telling you about they were called the Smooth Moves. That was the cigarette girls. When I did the auditions, a woman named Suzanne Palmer, who you probably know at this point, was auditioning, and she was incredible, but she couldn't dance the way that they needed to. But I wound up using her as a singer in a lot of stuff. And so I had this idea for a song. And the hook was There Will Come a Day. And so I called Craig, the guy who had done keyboards, say, hey, do you want to get together and collaborate on this thing? So we wrote the song There Will Come a Day. We brought Suzanne Palmer in to sing the song. And it is an 11-minute gospel house anthem. Okay. When this record came out, it changed my life. It changed everything. Pete Tong was all over. It was his essential tune for 4 weeks. Now, if you know anything about those days, your song was essential once. He picked it 4 times because I did a bunch of remixes. Anyway, so let me tell you how it wound up on Tribal. So I did the record, and you remember back in the day, still, you don't want everyone to have the same label to have all your records. Well, in those days, there were a lot of records, right? A lot of labels. There was 4th and Broadway, there was Emotive, there was 8 Ball, Strictly, Tribal, but the coolest were Strictly and Tribal. And Strictly was the birthing place of many great producers, Roger Sanchez, Masters at Work, DJ Sneak, Armand Van Helden. Whereas Tribal was the guys that pushed it left of center, Danny Tenaglia, Deep Dish, myself, BT, other folks on there in any event. So I thought, all right, well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to New York and I'm going to meet with every label except for Tribal. I'm not going to meet with them. Let me get it. And every single label passed on it. Everybody, right? So I came home, tail between the legs, dejected, I thought, okay, I'll send it to Rob. So I sent it to Rob. He goes, I'm not feeling it. I'm like, what? So, I went and had a little pity party. So I was still working on this record, Street Life, and I was doing remixes, doing my own mixes. And I don't know if you ever did this, but when I was finished, I called him on the phone. I played it over the phone. And can I swear on here?
Please do.
Okay, because I'm going to quote what he said. So I sent him, I played him the remix over the phone, and his words, not mine, Picchiotti, you're fucking brilliant. And I said, Rob, if I'm so fucking brilliant, why did you pass on the absolute? He goes, I don't know. So he goes, let me go listen to it again. Now remember, this song's 11 minutes, but I tell you, from the onset, from the beginning, you're like, what the, right? He calls me 5 minutes in. He goes, I don't know what I was thinking. I don't know where my head was at. Yes. And I had only done the original version. So I did that. And then, so this became my signature. So you would get a Mark Picchiotti production or remix and you get a big vocal record. You flip it over and you get something you're playing at 2:30 in the morning, because that's me as a DJ, playing 9 hours, I'm a journey DJ. I got to take you on the journey. So I express my art form that way. Love vocals, love producing them. It's my favorite thing to do. Then you flip the record over and we go dark and we dirty. So I had these mixes on here, the half tab dub and the black lozenge mix. I still play this to this day. In fact, one of them is forever enshrined in Grand Theft Auto. They got licensed for that. And I sold it to them in perpetuity. So then those dubs, the whole thing just hit. And then if you remember back in the day, you had DJ Magazine, you had Cool Cuts, and Cool Cuts was the first chart you got on. These are the coolest records. So the Absolute wound up on there again, 4 weeks in a row because of all the mixes. And then I had everyone from Paul Oakenfold to Booker T to Dave Seaman. Everyone was playing this record, and Danny Tenaglia. And I'm going to loop back to that in a little bit, but that's the record that changed. And honestly, Lenny, within 6 months after it came out, it started. Sony called me for first mix, and then I got a manager, and that was it. It was just every single pop star was ringing my phone with a remix request, which is a blessing.
And I'm going to tell you why.
Okay.
I'm going to tell you exactly why. And I remember this, and you're making me remember. Because on 27th Street, Junior Vasquez was killing it. And you had all the A&R guys there. And that's what fed the machine. When Junior played for 30 minutes, 45 minutes working it. So he would make sure you knew what that record was. Here's the thing about it, everyone, ladies and gentlemen. When I heard this record, I thought Mark was a black DJ because I'm hearing this gospel sound. I'm going, and then I've seen the picture later. I was like, oh, he's a white boy. Check him out.
Yeah.
All right.
And you probably thought Suzanne was black as well.
Yeah. 100%. She's
5 foot, Polish, blonde hair.
I know. I worked with her. She's a sweetheart. Wonderful person.
Yeah. So
keep going. So bring us on the journey.
All right. So let's see. I want to see if I'm missing anything in between all of that. Yeah. Well, let's talk about I had a false start with this record, Latour. So in 1987, Smash Records was reignited. It was a label that Chris Blackwell had on Island Records, and they opened in Chicago. And it was happening because he saw what was happening. So all of a sudden, Maurice Joshua, Steve Hurley, E Smooth, they were all getting signed, and they were all doing these records. So I'm like, I want in. So I would send him demos, and he did pass and everything, but he said, keep sending me stuff. In 1989, I was on vacation in Key West, and I called home to check my answering machine, you call number and type in a code. And there was a message from Marvin Gleicher, the owner of Smash, said, hey, Mark, I think I have a project for you. So when I got back, he brought me in and said, Latour, I want you to, we had a producer. We don't like him. We want you to do it. So they brought me to do it. And we had 2 big records that came from. The first one was People Are Still Having Sex, which was a top 40 record, quirky little record. And then Michael Douglas was producing a film called Basic Instinct. And he heard People Are Still Having Sex. So he wanted to license it. So the label sent him the album. Well, on the album is this wicked, trancey, vibey record called Blue, instrumental only. And he heard that and go, I want that one. So if you see the movie Basic Instinct, there's the dance floor scene at Limelight, and they're playing Injected with a Poison, which is a rave record. He goes in the bathroom, Sharon Stone's with her girlfriend in there doing what they're doing in the stall. He comes back out, and the song that they're playing is Blue. So I thought, I've made it, right? Well, we sold almost 500,000 albums, but it was a bit of a false start. But it's what kind of got me out there and got me going. That was 1990. So you had 90 all the way to 95 when There Will Come a Day popped. So I just wanted to fill that. And in between, listen, we did great stuff. That's when Terry and I, it's the first time I remixed Madonna. We did Bedtime Stories. And what had happened was Junior was her boy at the time. And Bedtime Stories was not going to get to #1. No diss on Junior, but it wasn't going to go to #1. So they scrambled and they went out to 4 remixers on spec. So Terry and I did the mixes. Long story short, they took our mixes only and all of them. So we've had, we did Paula Abdul at that time. That's when we did Heaven 17. I did Yellow, the band Yellow, big, Yellow. We remixed Vicious Games. I will have to say, that was a beautiful mix that Terry and I, just beautiful. Well, they loved it so much, they wanted us to produce them. So Dieter Meyer, who's the lead vocalist, came to Chicago, went in the studio. This is funny. And the song's called Do It. So he gets on the mic, $350 an hour for day rates in the studio. And all he does is say the words do it about 40 different ways. And that was it. And then Terry and I produced a record on that. You can get that is streaming. So a little bit of the highlights in that in between. So then Tribal hit and everything just took off. I got a manager, lovely man. His name is Howell, unfortunately, another person that passed. And Howell became a big figure in my life, became a very good friend. And at that time, he was managing a lot of people, myself, K-Class, Roger Sanchez, Jamiroquai for a minute. So he had the ear of a lot of folks. And Howell was, he was a boxer. So he'd take shit from anybody. He was a tough dude. So, and he could kind of run with the best of them. And, the record company is an old boy network. It was at that time. So he had friends at the labels and wound up getting me. I mean, that's how the Kylie thing came about. I was in talks to produce the Pet Shop Boys and that album fell apart. But yeah, I mean, so from about 96 to 2000, I probably was doing 4 remixes a month. And that's why I have a lot more remixes than I have productions. But I did have the productions that I did really exploded because I launched Blueplate, my label, in 97. And I released, on there, that's as we did, because then you have more control. And this is where Danny Tenaglia comes into the story. So I'm going to go back a little bit. So when The Absolute came out, I went on my first tour in England for the first time, which was really amazing. And I come back and it was Winter Music Conference. And if you remember at the time, it was only at the Fontainebleau Hotel. That's it. That's where everybody went. And there was a pool. That's where everybody met. And so somebody came up to me and said, hey, there's this guy named Simon Dunmore that's looking for you. And okay, whatever. I'm here, right? So Simon shows up and he goes, I'm Simon Dunmore. I'm with AM/PM Records. He said, I was out at the club and Danny Tenaglia played a song of yours, There Will Come a Day. He goes, I want to sign it. And I'm like, well, it's already signed to Tribal. And then I could see a little bit of dejection. Then right there, Simon, brilliant A&R guy. He goes, all right, how about if we create our own Absolute? I'm like, sure. Right. So that was Future Force and the song called What You Want, which was another massive Gospel House record. So he flew the singer to Chicago and I produced the song What You Want. And then that started the relationship with Simon, which was amazing. Right. I mean, Simon, when you're under his wing, he is just incredible. He treats you like his firstborn, but you have to deserve it. Son, you have got to work to get him to like what you're doing. But he just put me on everything, was just constant. So it was that AM PM just hammering it. They were the coolest label. There's a mix I did, Angel Morea's, I Like It. That's still, it's the money. That was just incredible. And then in 96, I had produced the follow-up for the Absolute called I Believe with Suzanne on it. And Rob with Tribal was leaving Tribal and getting ready to form Twisted. And so he offered me at the time an album deal. And I'll tell you, so the album, he offered $25,000, which is okay, but at that time, this is when single prices were going way up. People were paying a lot of money. Well, what happened was a year had gone and he still hadn't done the deal for Twisted. I meet Simon and I'm like, hey, what about this record? And I gave him I Believe. He's like, oh my God. Now, I Believe, as much as I love though, and it's an amazing record, I Believe just went even further than There Will Come a Day did. But that really soured the relationship between me and Rob, because Simon offered me $17,000 for one record and Rob hadn't signed it, right? So other than the album. So bit of a story. And that's how my relationship with Simon AM/PM Defected all started, was when Danny played. And going back to Danny, I released 2 other big records of mine, Bass Toy Runnin' on Blueplate and a song called The Return of Nothing by Sandstorm, both me and both different monikers. Bass Toy was what we'd call progressive house now, right? Sandstorm was trance, techno, but that's what I did. I did all sorts of stuff. So that's why I had the name Sandstorm. And Danny played both of those records when he went. So Danny did this tour in 96. That was it. Once he went to the UK and people discovered him, that's when it all just completely blew up for him. But he championed my records and the A&R guys heard him hear it. And so it's because of Danny that Bass Toy got signed the way it did. Sandstorm got signed. I'm sure it would have gotten signed, but I'm forever grateful for him for championing those records and then Bass Toy, I'll just keep that story going. So Bass Toy was an instrumental in 97, did major damage all over the place. Everybody loved it. I put a vocal on it. The reason I put a vocal on it was Moose T did a song called Horny that he put a vocal on. I thought, oh, I'm going to do the same thing. And the label that had signed it said, yeah, and they had to sign it again. So they signed it again. And next thing you know, it was a top 10 pop record in the UK. So, and that record went from 97 to 2001, from it being instrumental to being a vocal. And then I did a follow-up to Bass Toy called Turn It Up in 2008 that went #1 on Music Week, went #1 on Billboard Dance, but it didn't hit the pop stations. So anyway, I'm trying to get all my little stories in. And Sandstorm was one of those records that it kind of, I'd look it up. It defies categorization. So I had like deep house DJs playing it, and I had trance tech DJs playing that record too. So I'm throwing all different aspects.
No, it's good. No, we're getting it. And I remember these records all around the time and the semblance of every one of them.
Yeah. Yeah.
What happens to you, like a lot of us? What happened when David Guetta Begins, the EDM story starts?
That's interesting. So we're going to jump past a whole section of my career into.
Well, if you want to kind of surmise that part of your life and then talk into it. You can
okay. Yeah. Let me do that. That's a good idea. I want to highlight a couple of things. So now that I'm remixing Michael Jackson, you remember Frank Sorrello? I remember Frank. The guy's one of the most animated people I ever met. He calls me and he's squealing on the phone. Mark, you won't believe the remix I got you. Now, I didn't ask him to, but Frank, he's like, it's Michael Jackson. A song called History. One of the absolute worst Michael Jackson records of all time. Sorry, one of the worst. And I fucking turned that thing out. I polished a turd. Love Michael like everything he done, but I delivered that. But I had to do it 3 times in any event. So I had all the big pop stars call, and then what was happening was like Spice Girls broke up. Jerry Halliwell. So Jerry Halliwell comes to me to do her first single. Gary Barlow, Take That. So Robbie Williams, Gary Barlow, 96, Take That splits up. They hire me to produce a dance song for Gary, which is this, right? And that went #1. Then I got the call from Madonna, and the song I got, I don't know if it was Madonna's last album for Warner Brothers. So she phoned all this crap in. She did a cover of Rose Voice, Love Don't Live Here Anymore, which she had no right doing because it's a brilliant song. Her voice is fine. And I get it. I'm like, what am I going to do? It's a ballad. You're familiar with the song, yes? It's just this nice little Love Don't Live
Hell
Here
yeah, but I know how,
okay.
What's the name? Gwen Dickey sings it.
Yeah, okay. So Madonna does it, and it's okay. It's tepid. So I'm like, all right, what am I going to do? So I thought, I am going to turn this thing on its head. So I brought in my background singers. I wrote an entire gospel arrangement behind Madonna. So I created, again, a 10-minute gospel record out of an R&B ballad, Love Don't Live Here Anymore. And so the label flipped. Now, Madonna is now in Argentina filming Evita, right? And she's pregnant at the time. So I finished the mix. I send it to the label and they're like, Mark, we got to get Madonna on board, but we want this to be an A side. So what that means for new folks is if you do a record and they would release it, if it's on the B side, it's not considered the main single. So you don't get anything extra for that. But if it's the A side, they're saying to the radio station, whoever, this is the one we want you to play. So I got what's called A-side protection, and we did a new contract of production because I basically produced the record. Short of Madonna's vocal itself, everything else I did. So they sent it to her. She pushed back because I did all these backing vocals. But I want to say all her queers around her talked her into it because she had her cotillion. Like, no, you're missing the boat here. So it took 2 months, got the call back. She's on board with it. Then I had to do the contract. We did it all. Ready to go. And then I got the call and they're like, Mark, we've decided to move on and we're going to go with Don't Cry for Me, Argentina's next single. Sorry, but your single's not going to see the light of day. And I was devastated. They'd already promoted it. I've got it on vinyl. It never made it. And it's not even released. You can hear it on YouTube. So Madonna, Love Don't Live Here Anymore, Mark Picchiotti's mix. That's the only place that exists. So I wanted to get those stories in because they're a big part of what happened for me. And then I even had a chance to meet Madonna, but I was so like starstruck, I couldn't even come up with the words, but another story for another time. So that kind of covers, most of that time period. Okay. So at that point, I was the guy. This is a stat that I learned was during the entire year, I think it was either 98 or 97, I had 5 records in the top 15 of the club charts always for 5 years. For 1 year, five songs in the top 15. So I was I couldn't do any wrong. And I was just doing me. And here's the deal. I was in the right place at the right time with the right amount of talent. Luck plus talent equals success, right? 50% luck, 50%. So and that's why that happened. And I worked very hard. There's a guy that wrote the book. He used the Beatles as an example. If you want to become an expert, you got to spend 100,000 hours. Well, I've spent probably 10 million hours at this point in my life. And at that point, well over 100,000. So anyway, so Kylie had done the Impossible Princess album, which was a brilliant record, but not Kylie. It was this alt thing. And I recently watched the Kylie documentary, which helped fill in some of the blanks that I didn't quite understand what was going on. So she got dropped from the label. A guy named Miles Leonard picked her up on Parlophone, and Miles, a genius A&R man. He signed Coldplay. He signed The Verve. The guy, he had the ear and he knew what to do. So he signed Kylie and then he brought in big name producers and me. See, I didn't put myself in that cat. I never thought of myself like that, right? So they sent me a bunch of songs and said, pick a song. So I picked the song Butterfly that I was going to produce. So Kylie had worked with Brothers in Rhythm, and that's Steve Anderson and he's going to kill me if I can't remember his name. His partner. Anyway. So Steve was Kylie's music director, long story short. So he and Kylie wrote the song. And so I decided that's the one that I wanted to produce. Now, what had happened was this was going to be it. Either Kylie was going to make a comeback or not. So this was the record that I did for her on that album. And I flew to, let's see, how do we do this? No. So I did the basics at home. Then I flew to Ocean Way Studio in California and met with Kylie, recorded the song. A lot of story about great stuff. Met Bette Midler, Don Was. All of a sudden, like, oh, what's happening to me, right? Because now we're in the big leagues. She was very professional. People always ask me. It wasn't a big deal. It was, she came in, she sang the song. Now, when I went back and wrote with her the next time, that's a different story. So we did that and the record came out and out of my head, get out of my way. I can't think. It's In the Hot Pants. That's the song that blew up. And then the album did well, sold 1 million. So they came back to me and said, all right, we want you to write and produce on this next one. So this time I flew to London and the studio they could get was like, this room is gigantic. It was like a closet. So I'm in there with Kylie and Steve. We wrote 3 songs. One of them is called Give It To Me. And we recorded in this closet in the closet. And I thought, okay, that's going to be the demo vocal and we'll recut it later. So But at that point, Kylie was huge, man. And Can't Get You Out of My Head still hadn't come out. In fact, I remember being in London, going to EMI Records, getting off at the Hammersmith station. And the EMI building is like a football field long. It's only 3 stories high, has no windows. And I didn't get who Kylie was because, right, Kylie wasn't huge in America. She was the locomotion. That was it. So I get out of the train station. I look at the building and there is a poster that is as long as a football field, as a third tall with Kylie on it. I thought, oh my God, now what? So I get in the studio, we write the songs, I send it, and they're like, we like this one. And I'm like, okay, Kylie, I will have a revocal. Like, no, you got to go with what you had. Well, Kylie's such a professional that I really didn't need it. But I brought in my background singers to do all the background parts and just created this kind of electro house kind of a record. And thank God, I had publishing on it. And then that record had Can't Get You Out of My Head, sold 8 million copies. In fact, Butterfly was supposed to be the 4th single. But again, they're like, oh, no, we're going to move on to the next record. So never saw the light of day. And then I wound up remixing probably 5 other songs of Kylie's. This one record called All I See. It's just a brilliant record and it just missed. They just missed out on it. So probably all the way up until 2005, I'd done 2 productions, co-wrote, and then remixed about 5 of her records. And that was great. And then actually during that time, I got a new manager and I was being sent all over the world, basically writing with basically like 2nd tier artists, people who took 2nd and 3rd on Pop Idol, which is like American Idol. Writing with all these different folks. And it was a misstep on my management part. So I wasn't doing as many productions, though I did a Jersey Street, which was a big record on Defected. Thank God they signed that record. But then you're right. Then 2005 came around. So, well, let's talk about the demise of the record industry, right? So around 2003, all of a sudden, I started getting bankruptcy notices from these labels that had signed Bass Toy and Sandstorm that owed me, money on 20 million compilations that they weren't going to pay me. By the way, that's why I took the time to go traveling and writing with people. I thought I got the money coming in. Well, all of a sudden I went from having this large amount of money coming in to it being cut off completely. And at that point, Strictly Rhythm was my joint venture deal for Blueplate. And I could smell something going on because I was owed a very simple check, one small check. This is how small it was, 50 grand. That was just for advances on licenses to comps. So Runnin' was on 150 compilations. So I remember I was in Covent Garden and my assistant called me, my business manager said, Mark, he said, the day you thought might happen has happened. He said, I just got the bankruptcy notice from Strictly. I was like, and I could just see I'm like, oh my God, and we're, talking about a lot of money. And so that's when it all shifted. And a year later, I closed my business. I closed the studio. I had to let my employees go. I kept one employee. I bought a home. I built a home, built a studio in there and kind of had to downsize over the years. And so, yeah, I mean, I still had successes, but I wasn't getting the big money, right? So you had to downsize and figure out, because there's no way I was going to do anything else. There's just no way, this is it. I don't have to make anything. As long as I can pay my bills, I'm happy.
Let me clarify a couple of things to the audience. When 9/11 happened, and the World Trade Center came down.
Yes, thank you for bringing this up.
I remember dance departments in New York within that week were closed. Major companies were shutting their dance divisions like instantaneous. At the same time, Napster came out. Previous. So now you were able to get all this music for free. We were all freaking out. So you had an implosion happen at the same time. And then because of the monies, everything being restricted and everything going to become a freebie, the big companies came in, like Warner's bought Strictly Rhythm. I remember we bought Strictly because I was part of that too. When you talk about the bankruptcy, I had and I promise you, we're going to do this. We got a 5-year deal. They didn't last a year with.
Yeah. I'm glad you brought up 9/11. So for people young, 9/11 killed club culture. It's never been the same. It has never been the same. And you're a New Yorker, so you're much more intimate with what was going on there. But people just shut down. They pulled back. They didn't want to have fun because they were scared. I was scared and I lived in Chicago. So yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because that was a pivotal point that changed the spirit of clubbing is what happened. It changed the spirit of it. It's come back. But yeah, so, and then what was happening was the remix culture was dying because it was easy. I was getting 20 grand, 30 grand to do a remix because they were selling the CD with my mix on it for $12, so they're making their money back. I remember I did a remix for an artist you'd never heard of, Kelly LaRock. And I remember meeting with the A&R guy later and I said, why'd you drop her? He said, well, she wasn't doing well. And we thought, oh, we'll just take a loss. Then your remix came in and we made $250,000 off of your remix. I'm like, all right, well, pay me, bitch, but in any event, so, they were making a lot of money from that stuff. And then the remix culture died and it is now dead, right? The only time someone's going to do a remix of a consequential artist is if they are big. So you've got Guetta and, Calvin Harris and Afrojack and all the guys that have 20 million streams doing remixes because the labels know that they're going to get that, so I digress a little.
Here's something that when we talk about the current generation posed to the, 80s and 90s and all that happened, the social media, you watched how all of us, or should I say all of you, because I'm going to put myself out of this, all of you were the go-to at the time. Okay. And there was no pictures and things where they were, you were snapping in the studio on mixing Madonna, right? But then
I didn't have pictures. I'd have regular pictures of anything. Yeah.
Right. You just didn't do that back then. Now, of course, moving forward, smartphone begins and all that happens. And then pictures become prominent and all this. And those that remember, they're old enough. MySpace was the first one, if I remember.
Right. Yeah.
Remember MySpace?
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Whatever happened to MySpace? Crickets, birds, right? Okay.
Right. Yeah.
You watch people that really had no following, all of a sudden had millions of followers. It was like, and people that were doing it for the last 25 years just couldn't figure out how to catch up.
Yeah.
Where were you in the middle of that whole transcending change?
Definitely pushing against it. And, I'm not a person who has regrets at all. I literally don't, because everything I've done, the bad times, the good time, got me where I'm at. And so I'm just blessed to be alive today. So I don't really have any regrets for anything. But I'm old school. How did we promote records? Well, you went to the record store, and if you were lucky, the guy put it as a feature on the wall. You know what I'm talking about, right? And so I even with MySpace, a friend of mine said to me once, he goes, Mark, why aren't you on MySpace? So you're so good at promoting yourself and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, I ain't got the time, right? So it took a while for me to really warm up to social media because I get it. I understand it. And it just is what it is. But if you've got the artistry over here and the business over here, right? So I understand the business, but now all of a sudden the artistry is becoming less important and the business is grabbing an aspect of all of this that I call in the file that's called nonsense, that really doesn't have a lot to do with the art form and has a little bit more to do with the hype built around it. So, I'm a DJ who looks good on camera or whatever that is. That's great. But what does that tell me about your music? So I couldn't really buy into that for a minute. And then I started to see like, man, you're going to go down with the ship. So you really got to step up your game. So I did, but, late in the game. And, I'm still not on it as much as I can be, but that's okay. It's all right. Honestly. Yeah. I don't know. I'm just now getting on TikTok and in a more active manner because I realize, that's a whole nother aspect. And I put out a lot of records. So now, I need eyes on my records because you can't just release it and pray, you'll only get your followers and that's not enough for me.
No, of course it's not. That's why I asked you where you are with the whole social media thing. Cause, hey, listen, it's like the kids, they just get it. For us, it's a bit of a force-fed thing, especially when you come from a homogenous, organic situation of building something.
Yeah.
Like you said, business on the left, artistry on the right.
Yeah.
How do we, bridge the gap? And this is where, for those that, see it from a different perspective, how do you say to yourself, I'm not playing around with Instagram. I'm not doing TikTok.
You don't.
Then what?
Then you get him a job at Target is what you're doing. So no diss to anyone who works at Target, Listen, but here's the other thing. There was a time when I was not in a good way financially at all. The housing market, the labels going bankrupt, I lost almost everything, truly. And I'm glad I did. I was a millionaire and then I wasn't.
What did you do? You left us hanging on a cliffhanger like the Dallas. Like,
so
what did you do to get out of that hole? That's what I want to know. This is the true part of it.
Okay. So here's the thing. You and I were talking recently and I said, I'm not Mark Picchiotti, the record producer. That's my name and that's the thing that I do. That's not who I am. Right. So I was able to understand that this is what I love. This is a gift I've been given. And my ethos about my profession is this is the talent that the universe has given me. And we both know that when you go on the dance floor, it's like a church, right? And so I'm there delivering vibes to people who are going to connect with their humanity in a way that they may not otherwise be afforded, either by society, family, work, whatever it is. But you go to the dance floor and you get a communion, right? So, and what I'm doing is and any DJ is touching the humanity because this is interesting about music. So music hits the parasympathetic nervous system. It hits the vagus nerve, which is the thing that runs right through your body and makes you feel good. That's why when you sing, it feels good because it triggers the vagus nerve. And that's why music is tension and release. I teach this I taught it in my class. So you get the tension and then the release. A great song that's incredible tension, incredible release is Adele, Someone Like You. The pre-chorus has so much tension in it. When that chorus comes, and of course it's Adele, you're like, oh, it's like an orgasm. And I always talk about that. Music has orgasms to it. So I'm going off on a little bit of the Mark Picchiotti human ethos, but that's where I come from when it comes to music. I was telling you that they did a survey of kids under the age of 18 and they said, what do you want to be when you grow up? And the number one answer was famous, right? So that's the world that we live in now. That's not me, right? And I think the other thing, this is a really important thing, is that, so I have this thing. It's my creative, it's my spiritual bank, right? And I fill it with that stuff. That's my music. And I have to tap it all day long to do what I do. It's like you sit down, you got to reach in, you got to grab all of that. And it's the same thing as going to the gym and working out. When I'm done producing vocals, I'm exhausted. So now I've got to go to that same bank to tap it, to do social media, to present my best self, to be creative, to all of that. It's a big ask. It didn't exist before. I have yet to learn, I'm learning how to integrate that into me, into my ecosystem. So I'm way more comfortable with it now, but it's not natural, right? If you're born into that, it's different. That's why I am a little bit afraid of AI music because a kid who's 5 years old who doesn't know the difference and hears AI, fully generated AI music goes, oh, that's really good. And if they don't have something to counterbalance that with, then that's going to become the norm. I don't think that's going to. I don't. That's a whole nother conversation. But in any event, so social media, it's the necessary evil. We'll just call it.
It is a necessary evil, but you need the balance.
Yeah, well, of course.
Balance. You need the balance, good and bad, fire and water.
Yeah.
As much as I hate to say it, there's a big thing going on right now. FAI, I keep telling everyone, don't say that. Embrace it, because if you don't have to take it and completely sit yourself down and go, I'm not doing stuff anymore. I'm going to let everything go by the robotic side. Yeah. You can use it to your advantage if you're smart enough, but that's up to the user.
Yeah. 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 And like you said, that's a whole nother, listen, I'm finding my way with it because I'll say this about that. When I make a record, the best part of making a record is making the record. If there's one day I get a Grammy, great. I get the nomination. That's cool. I show up at the Grammys. Let's say I win. I go up, I win it. I got the award. I feel good for that moment. I come home. I put the award on the mantle. And that feeling is gone. That's it. It's done. I get to say I'm a Grammy winner, right? At the same time. But that's not why I'm in this business. So I'm not doing this to be famous. I became famous, and that was a happy byproduct to some degree. But at the end of the day, if you remove humanity from things, you remove the whole purpose, And then I'm talking about, again, this is to your point. You can use your tools. But when I'm in the studio and I've got the bass player, I'm working with the singers, man, I'm in heaven. My juices are flowing. I am living my best life in that moment. So if you're a new person in music and you buy a program like Suno and you say, make me a song that sounds like this, you will get a song and you'll have your product, but you're missing the fun. And yeah, it's kind of fun when it does. It blew me away when I did, like, oh my God, right? But at the same time, we can't remove the humanity out of everything because then, the whole reason we're here is to learn. The whole reason we're here is to have a challenge, meet the challenge, grow from the challenge, and move on. And if you remove all the challenges in making music, then there's no growth. And then AI eats itself because it's feeding on what we created. And if no one's making anything new anymore, then it's just regurgitating the old crap.
Correct. Was there a time where you said, I'm not doing this anymore? Even after the whole saga, what happened with everything imploding around
everything, yeah. There have been times I've thought about it. And, to be honest, I took a job as a professor because I needed the money, So, no, I've always been, and I loved it, by the way. I love teaching. I'm a paid forward guy. You cannot keep it if you don't give it away, period. That's just the way it is. So, and I'm very much that way. I've had interns. I've had a lot of people through my rooms, by the way, who've gone on to have success. And when they come in, I tell them, listen, you're not staying here. Using this as a launch pad, you get everything that you can. And if you have an opportunity to move on, I want you to do it. And that's always been the way that I work with people. So there's never been a time where I said, I'm not doing this. I've fantasized about it. Like, oh, I wonder what it'd be like. And I'm just like, no. So I've done what I could to make it happen. And thank God, about 6 years ago, the hard work paid off. It kicked back in and I'm not making the same money, but I am making noise. My records are doing well. I just had a number 2 record in the UK this year, number 3 the year before that. So, it's still going. And you're not.
Look.
What's that?
It goes to show you have talent. They can't take that away from you. That comes from within. You cannot, everybody says the same to me. Thank God you're making records again. Did you take a break? No, I never took a break. What happens is you fall out of favor because styles change, people change. The go-tos that you used to go to are no longer there. Like you talk about Frank Cirillo.
Yeah.
Bobby Shore was at MCA. Yep. They're not in those places anymore. There is none of that bureaucracy anymore to go run to, to go sit down. Something that's missing that we're all doing now is old school A&Ring. Like you talk about Simon Dunmore. I talk about Gladys Pizarro, Rob DiStefano. Rick Scalante was in promotions, Bobby Shore, Carmen Cacciatore.
Claudia Cusetta. Remember
Claudia Cusetta at Maxi.
Yeah, at Maxi, yep.
Leslie Doyle. I mean, the list goes on and on. That A&R type of promotions person, they were out with us in those clubs and they were, for example, like you were saying about sending stuff to Smash. And I tell this to people over the years, they might not have liked say the singer or the song, but they heard pieces of the production that they wanted from what you were doing in their records. That's how those things happened. I noticed you mentioned that when you were doing the remixes, you basically weren't remixing, you were reproducing and rewriting.
I was producing. Absolutely, yeah.
Were you able to renegotiate all these contracts opposed to just the pay as you play? In other words, they would pay you for the work. Were you able to get on most of these records the back end, the royalties and the writership on the remixes?
Once I learned that was an option, I would always go for it. I didn't always get it. But yeah, so more towards the back end of the remix career. But at the same time, though, some of I could do it with smaller artists. Bigger artists, it was hard. So like I remember I did Mariah Carey and it was a huge fee. It was $30,000. And I'm like, I want some back end. They're like, you can piss off. It's Mariah, So, and this was when Mariah was Mariah. So, I mean, she still is, but when she was constantly out there, when she was the it kid. So yeah, I was able, but not always successful. And listen, I mean, 20, 30 grand. Although I will say my overhead at my business was 30 grand a month. I had employees, I had salaries, I had health insurance to pay, I had a lot of people to take care of at that particular time. So that 30 grand went, quickly. Plus I furnished the whole studio. I mean, I had $1 million studios. It was all my money building all that stuff out, which I all want. And that's, by the way, that's how I was able to survive during the lean years. It's just selling the stuff I no longer needed. And it's funny because I went to ADE in 2016. That's the Amsterdam Dance Event, which is sort of the main event of the year for dance music. And I met with all the usual suspects, all the people I knew. I had about 25 meetings. This is because something you said reminded me of this. And I came home and I sent all the follow-up emails. I sent 25 emails and not one person responded to me. So you talk about being the flavor of the month. They're like, and they didn't even listen to the music. So that's the problem, is they weren't even listening to it. And then back to Defected. So I'll tell this part of the story. So I relaunched Blueplate in 2018. It was kind of a slow start. Nothing really happened. Lockdown happens. Now I've been in the studio. All I'm doing is producing music, by the way, because there's no remix. I'm just record after record after record, and no one's listening to them. So 2020 happens. Simon Dunmore had come to Chicago. Well, Simon signed records, as you now know, from producers all over the world to build the Defected catalog, which eventually I knew what he was doing when he did it. I'm like, I know what you're doing here. You're going to build this thing up so robust that a major's going to come in and give you a shit ton of money and you're going to sail off into the sunset, which he did for like 4 months. Now he's back at it, right? God bless him. So he came to Chicago and he purchased 4 of my tracks. And one of them was a song called Pump the Boogie. And so they, in 2020, would say, okay, we're going to start doing your catalog. So they did that and I remixed it. And they're like, well, we have to approve the mix, but they had other mixers, but it wound up, my mix was the A side. And that was it. As soon as I had that, it came out on Glitterbox. Every record, everybody opened the emails, everybody listened. Right. So now, and since that time, it's been the case. Right. So that, to your point, the talent never goes away, but you get all the up and comings and they're getting all the shiny, they look all shiny and new and
yeah,
their
it's
social media,
low-hanging
blah, blah,
fruit,
blah.
baby. Low-hanging fruit. They want the low-hanging fruit. They forget how tasty the fruit was that came from, from the people like ourselves back when we were, in that arena. Some of us never left, but the shiny objects come out. It's nice. I understand. People are just trends and things change, but it always takes one trendsetter, like you said, that hears something and they release it and bam.
Bam. Yeah. And if you remember in 2020, Glitterbox was on fire. I mean, their stuff, things have changed at Defected, but at that time, everything, and they didn't sign a lot of records. So if you saw them on Glitterbox, you're like, whoa, and then they did. So I believe I signed that record to them and just crushed it. DJ Spen did mixes on it. Sophie Lloyd did a brilliant mix. Well, and I did a mix on it. That was very different, very, very different. And that record does very well to this day, So yeah, I would be interested in talking about the David Guetta phenomenon if you
please
want to hear my perspective.
Yes, of course. You have to give it to us because, you're a veteran of the game. You've been around a long time. So we want to know your thoughts about, and then what proceeds after.
Yeah. So 2005, 2006, Tonight, right? Black Eyed Peas, produced by David Guetta. That was it. And all of a sudden that was a sound. And the next thing, he sampled the Etta James record, and it was the beginning of what I called confetti music. The reason I call it confetti music is that it was so formulaic. The verse would drop out, there'd be no beat, and it would be all about the drop, which is interesting, by the way. So the drop today means when the beat comes in. Before that nonsense, it meant when the beat dropped out. So it took a while for me to get the jargon right. So then we saw a DJ producer become a pop star, selling out arenas, getting paid a fortune. And that was the beginning of it. So, and then that's when corporate America came in, right? As soon as they see something, they start. So from 2005, then it just kept going. Now you're at like then Calvin Harris comes on the scene and he blows up doing Rihanna. And all these guys are great producers. Nothing, honestly, I respect everything they do. Diplo, another amazing producer, people who know what the deal is, right? But they were in the right place at the right time where the world was ready for DJs to be pop stars. So now all of a sudden, guys like myself, and I'm older. I'm 60. I'll be 64 this year. In 2015, I was 50 whatever. So I'm not a new kid, even in the early aughts, I'm in my 40s, still doing it. But so then I think what happened was everything became so formulaic and you just had that constant. That's, to me, EDM, even though it stands for electronic dance music, was the formula. It was that formula thing. And all of a sudden I'm getting club length mixes that are 3 minutes and 30 seconds long. I'm like, what are you doing here? Like all of a sudden and then what they're doing is they're starting to remove themselves from the club culture and they're playing to the general market. So, and now you've got, because of social media, ADD and the short attention span. I remember went to a club once and this guy played 2 minutes, maybe a minute of each song. I'm like, what are you doing? I barely got to the chorus. I literally went up to the DJ and said, why aren't you playing the full song? Because people don't want to hear the song. They just want to hear the chorus and move on. And I was like, oh my gosh, and then you're.
Oh yeah, everybody, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Scissorhands. I remember when that guy came out, it was 35 to 50 seconds a song. I said, whoa, wait a minute. We're not even getting to the first verse, no less the chorus. It was like, bam, bam, bam. It was like, whoa.
Yeah. So I think the whole, again, that's when it started. That was the era of the beginning of a pop star DJ, right? And then everybody that came to follow that. So, I think it's interesting. What I don't appreciate, it's okay. Use the technology. You can use the sync button. That's fine. But we're getting to the point now where we have kids that know how to make a record and they don't know how to DJ. So they have somebody put together an entire hour-long set and they get in front of 50,000 people. They hit play and they pump their fist in the air and they twiddle the knobs. Now, that's not everybody, and I'm not indicting anyone. I'm just sad that we're at this point. And it is what it is. This isn't everybody. But the fact that we've gotten to that point, it's like, ouch, right? Ouch. And I think that's why, for those of us who've been around a minute, why AI has the barbs that it does, because we see what's happening with technology and how the art form is getting diluted for the sake of the dollar. All the woes in this world right now are because people are greedy. They think that the more money I have, the happier I'll be. And what happens is they get the more money. They're like, I'm still not happy, so I got to get more. So we're living with that. We're living with a cultural thing that's happening. And it's unfortunate for young people that don't have somebody modeling something different for them. But I think, I'm happy to play in my sandbox now, right? I have a lot going on. The thing is, I can produce dance music, but I can produce just about anything and have. I've done a lot of projects you don't know about. I've done R&B and I spent 3 years developing an artist. He's a classically trained electronic violinist who sings his most beautiful voice. And I developed him for 3 years and produced an 11-song album that I'm just now shopping. So I put my feelers in all different places. I'm working again in the Gospel House arena. I'm doing some pop artists. I partnered with an entertainment company out of LA for this very reason. To your point about, how you're getting by, I need to get in some of my stuff in the pop arena so I can get that 10, 20, 100, 200 million streams to get something going, right? That's just the game that's played these days. Because if I don't, there's publishing money, there's a little other money. I'm happy to play in my sandbox because I know what works, I know what doesn't work, and I get my fulfillment. And yeah, do I want to be someone that's getting 1 million monthly streams? Absolutely. Here's the deal. Very simple, because I've seen it on some of my records. 1 million monthly streams, even though we get paid squat, on 1 million streams, average net gross income is between $3,000 and $4,500, right? That's average, because it depends on what territories and blah, blah, blah. So you look at a DJ like Purple Disco Machine, who's getting 10 million monthly streams. Well, that's 30,000 to 45,000 net, right? Or gross, right? So the label takes money, the blah, blah, blah. But even half of that, a third of that is money you can live on, right? So right now the game is about where are the revenue streams. There's publishing. If you're a producer, you're watching this, make sure you are signed up with Sound Exchange. I'm not going to tell you what it is. Research it. The MLC. If you're a songwriter, a label, if you're an artist, get on those platforms because they're revenue streams that will pay you money in places you didn't even know that exist, right? And then there's PPL money, which is money from the UK that we're now negotiating to get through Sound Exchange. So there's all these different avenues to make money these days as well. There's, I get some sync fees. My songs get placed in TV, films, that kind of stuff. So right now the game is how many different places can I put out my wares to monetize them? But at the same time, at the core of everything is Do I love this? Is this a great product? I never let something out the door if I don't feel like it's, it's one of my children, like that I don't want to adopt, but I'm going ahead and let it go into the world.
And that's the thing. Even when you think it's maybe a stepchild, you just don't know, because that stepchild could become a diamond.
Yeah. In fact, my biggest streaming record is that I call it the little engine that could. So I've never told this story, so you're getting the exclusive here. Truly, I was hired to remix Sam Smith's "Stay With Me." You remember how that was a record that blew him up? I crushed it. I did this beautiful 108 beats per minute because the song's pretty slow. Sent it to the label. Deborah Erickson was A&Ring it, and she goes, "Mark." She hired me to do the mix. She said the vice president of Capitol Records called me and said, "This record is so genius. He thought it was something that Quincy Jones did." Her words, not mine. So again, this is another one of those misses, right? So the label's all for it, blah, blah, blah. Well, Sam's managers were young and they had a different take. They wanted the mixes to come as if they were bootlegs, and then they would do it. And if you go look at the Sam Smith mixes, they all started out as bootlegs. So they didn't want a commissioned mix. So again, I was like, oh, you've got to be kidding me. So I just took the track, took the vocal off it, wrote a whole new song on it. 108 beats per minute, right? So it's not like a big club record. And I sent it everywhere. Nobody wanted it. And finally, I'm like, all right, I'll release it on my own. And then Studio 54 started a label. And J. Kriv, who I knew, connected me with them. And so I sent them some stuff. They heard that. They're like, we love this record. So I gave them the record, and it's my biggest streaming record to date. Now, I have an issue with them because they're out of business. They haven't paid me. So if anyone from Studio 54 is watching this, you owe me money. I'm coming after you.
Yeah, I was wondering what happened to them, because in 1 minute they were there and next minute they were gone.
Out of business. They were paying me, then they stopped. They're in breach of contract all over the place. So, but I digress. But anyway, the little engine that could. Even this record I pointed out earlier, everybody rejected it. Here, that's the thing I want to say. I knew there was something about it. I knew this record was good. I knew it in my bones. I knew it was right. And I felt the rejection. But I did not stop. Right. And then when I said to Rob, if you think I'm such a fucking genius, why don't you sign this? He heard it and bam, it landed. Right. That has happened so many times, because when I teach my class, the first thing I tell the students is, listen, I'm going to tell you how to make a record, but I'm going to tell you how to affect a person's humanity. How many people in the room have ever felt sad and put on a record because they felt sad? How many people put on a record that lifts them up? Everyone's raising their hands about the emotional aspect of making a record, because that's what it comes down to. So if I feel it, there's at least one other person out there that's going to feel what I do. And if I really feel it, 2 people, 3 people, and hopefully millions. So that's a bit of my, approach to making music as well.
So your ethos is you have to persevere regardless. No matter how many no's, you must get that yes. If it's 1,000 no's, don't stop there.
Yeah. Very much so.
What an amazing story.
Thanks.
And the good part and the sad part is that a couple of times you had some really big number possible A-sides that just was unlucky because of corporate. Corporate does that. They just change up. Well, what we thought was good yesterday, nope, we're going with the Argentina record for Madonna. It's like,
yeah.
Evita.
Yeah. So it's been one hell of a journey, and I'm slower than I used to be, but I just keep doing it. I'm so excited. The label's doing well. It's only been a year, but we're doing well with the label. I have 8 artists signed to the label, and, I've got records coming out all the time, but I also shop records around to get it on different labels to get it placed. And right now we're out there trying to get a deal for this violinist that I mentioned.
I'm trying to work out, what labels do you go to now to sign that type of act that you have? Like, who are you going to?
So dance music so dance music, it's the usuals. It's Nervous, Tinted, Defected, Tool Room, blah, blah, blah. For the R&B artists that I'm working with, that's an entirely different ecosystem. So the people I'm working with are pretty well connected. They do big artists. And I've been very fortunate that they've discovered my talent. I do consulting, and I ran a project for them last year for one of their artists. I brought the entire project. I A&R'd it, did all the mixes. I brought it to the dance world worldwide, and it wound up number 13 on the pop charts. Peaked out on some dance charts as well, so it did really well. So I'm that's the other thing is networking, finding the people to work with. So this is a company that does artist development, and they hired me to consult, and now I'm working with them on certain things. But it's very they're doing a lot of stuff. They do film, they do TV. So they're helping me with that. And then there are some A&R people that I still have the relationships with, like Miles Leonard, who did the Kylie stuff. He is the executive vice president, Warner Brothers Europe. So I will send him things, but very rarely. It has to be something like Bruce Kirkwood. That's the artist I'm talking about. And then the other more pop centric ones, I'm working with this LA company because they have infrastructure that gets it out on the TikTok world and all of that to get that kind of stuff. This is brand new. This has only been going on for 6 months now. So we're still developing. I've got 3 artists of theirs, 3 songs they gave me. And then I find the artist and I develop the artist, write the song, or they wrote some of them. I write the other ones to get it going. So it's a matter of just, networking, getting people who can help you. The dance labels I've got, although that's still difficult. The bigger labels, it's just catch as catch can. Who do you know? Networking, reaching to folks that I know in the business. Who do you think would like this record?
Do you get bothered that they look at algorithms more than they're listening to the music?
So if I know that someone's doing that, that can bother me, but no one ever says that to only once. And our lovely friend Hash Gorelli, and he was right on point when he said it. He's like, at that point, I had 3,000 streams. He's like, Mark, I can't hook you up with this artist because they're young. I totally get it. Right. And he was right. He was totally right. Lenny, I don't really think about it too much anymore. It just is what it is.
See, that really aggravated me when you said that. And I know what he's talking about.
Yeah, no, and he's fine. Again, he was right by saying that is the world we live in today.
That they actually look at
That's off.
Before they even talk to you, how you're clicking. It's crazy.
Yeah. Well, he was looking more on the benefit of a young artist that he had. And he said, I can tell you now, Mark, that this is what's going to happen. So just be prepared. I'm like, okay, cool. So he's the one that pointed it out to me. That was actually probably the first time. Yeah, probably the first and only time I think that if it's happened, it's unbeknownst to me. You know what I mean? Like someone makes a decision and they don't pick up a record or don't sign a record of mine or whatever, But actually, I'm at a point now. I get multiple offers on my records. This last one I just signed to Big Love had multiple offers on it. So, and there's not a lot of money in it. It's all about visibility, right? So I'm going back out on the road. I love listen, that's the other thing too. I want to say this. People thought I was just a record producer, right? And that's it when it was kicking. Like, come on, man, look behind me. Now, by the way, this is just what's left of 40,000 records. DJing informs my production. It has to. This tour was brilliant. I loved it because I came back with all these ideas. I can't be the record producer I am if I'm not out there delivering the music to people. And I know you know what I'm talking about, So DJing is first, always will be.
Bro, you got to get on that ground running. If you're not on that ground running, it's hard to get that feeling. I mean, in the lab, you're in the lab, but there's nothing like that church. That dance floor is all our church. Those cathedrals are our church, just like D.C. LaRue said. These cathedrals are our church, and that dance floor is where we lay the gospel down.
Yeah.
Mark Picchiotti.
Lenny Fontana, thank you.
Stop. You have to stop right here. You've given us a plethora of information.
I appreciate the time.
I know you're not going to be ending anytime soon. And I'm glad to see you got the boxing gloves on and you're fighting and you're feeling it again, because with these situations, the way things and technology moves, it could be disheartening, but I see you have a very strong exterior, which is great. And that took a lot to get there. And I know the age, we're all feeling that we're getting older, but you know what? We still got our ears. We still know what makes people move. You can't take that away from any of us.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
No doubt.
So good luck to you.
And thank you, my friend.
Yes. And thank you. This has
Congratulations.
been a pleasure. Thank you. And we wish you all the best. Tune in each and every week. Or should I say each and every time an episode comes out, because this is the reason why True House Stories is the show it is for these legends. Thank you again, Mark.